Hello and welcome to the Crate and Crowbar. It's the 28th of June and this is episode 147?
That's right, Pip.
Yes!
Who's here?
Oh, well, there's you, Chris Thurston.
Hi.
And super special guest, John Roberts.
Hello.
Hey.
More special by the day.
Yeah.
I've been trying to, use a new credential every time I introduce myself. But I'm onto some really obscure mods now. So if you ever played a Neverwinter Nights 2 module with backpacks in, I made them.
Thanks, John.
That's awesome. You could also maybe have a new title every time we introduce you, like not just super special guest, you could be like Colonel John Roberts.
I quite like that. I can collect titles like
Admiral.
the Mother of Dragons.
First of his name. King of the Andals and the First Men.
Or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this works.
Darth Roberts.
Okay, so we were going to talk about the Steam sale.
That's the most newsworthy thing any one of us can think of in what has been a totally uneventful week for the world. Let's talk about things with dollar signs next to them getting progressively lower.
Anyway, no, the dollar would get the higher against it. Okay, fine. Anyway, so...
Let's all be good consumers and buy as much as we possibly can.
Well, I haven't really bought much in this here Steam sale. Although, I did pick up Child of Light earlier today, which is that Ubisoft playable poem thing that they did a while back. And I played it at a preview event, and I quite like the combat system and some of the, artwork and design and stuff. But, overall, it just sort of didn't really do it for me, and so I just left it alone, and then it was suddenly about £2 or £3. So I figured, I'll just sort of take a chance on it and see how it goes. But there's been a far less of an, that's a significant reduction, I'll take a chance on it this time around.
It's interesting. They've thoroughly changed the way Steam sales work. So there are no longer daily deals and there are no longer flash sales. There's no kind of timed component apart from the sale itself. Instead, everything is just reduced by the amount it will be reduced for the entire sale. And based only on comments I've seen on our website, this is enormously contentious between people who feel like they are being ripped off and people who feel like they've finally stopped being ripped off.
Is this a response to refunds? Is this the first sale they've had since refunds? Because otherwise I imagine there'd be a huge amount of chargebacks as people see the thing they bought the day or the hour before then substantially reduced.
That's a good point. Might well be that.
Possibly, although if something is reduced less, it might be that you're more inclined to get a refund if you don't like it, whereas if I'd picked something up for a fraction of the cost, like if it was 75% off or something, then I might just be, it was only a few quid, I'll just suck up the loss rather than go through the palaver of making a claim or whatever. So I'm not really sure how that would work apart from how I would use it anecdotally, I guess.
I think it could also simply be that they are reacting to the way people had sort of eventually become trained to use the sale, where there's normally a big roundup on the last day where some of the most popular deals get brought back out again. And so everyone waits. If you want a game, you don't buy it straight away, you wait until it's on sale. If you basically never buy a game at its regular advertised, even discounted price during a Steam sale because the chance of a huge flash sale deal or the chance of a daily deal is always so high.
I wonder if there's what I was thinking was that maybe that applies as a sort of an even wider thing, just in terms of the way I've noticed that some people are reporting that they wait and wait and wait until something is just part of the Steam sale. Not even just the last day of it, but that idea of, I'll just get it in the sale because it'll be dirt cheap then. And training people just not to buy things full price at all. So maybe a more moderate discount of 10% or 20% makes the full price version less of a weird thing to say, I'll pick that up.
Maybe that's the case now. Originally, Valve and Steam were very keen to point out that, the benefits of a total crash sale were exponential, that you just make more money the cheaper you go.
Yeah, we certainly saw that at the start of the indie boom or whatever. But lately, a lot of people are becoming more and more opposed to it. Like, The Witness is only about 10% off at the moment, I think. So
I think it's gone down from 30 quid roughly to about 24. So
Yeah.
whatever
I
that
mean,
is.
speaking personally, like, I find that this is actually, I prefer it this way, partly because if I fancy playing something, I understand what I'm getting and I'm not going to feel ripped off if I buy it now and then find out in a day it's, 20 quid less or something. The other side of it is it doesn't reward the weird old kind of acquisitive thing or like hoarding thing that previous Steam sales encouraged, where you'd buy a game because it was, it's 4 quid and I kind of want to play it eventually. And that's what leads to those lists of shame, the kind of the huge backlog of Steam games that you haven't actually touched, which I have. Like, I've picked up a handful of things in this sale and I've played all but one of them now. And that was because I felt like, well, I'll look through this and figure out what do I actually value at this price point rather than what am I hoarding in the event that I need to play like all of the King's Quest games. Just I have that thing. So it's better. Honestly, it's more of an investment if I spend the 8 quid now to get all of them.
Well, hang on. So what did you get and what did you get, John?
I picked up a few things. I got South Park, just because it finally came down to the kind of impulse buy purchase. And it's incredibly late and unfashionable to say that you're stunned how much it looks like an episode of South Park. But it does, and it's genuinely incredible.
Yeah, it does look great.
I got SteamWorld Dig, which I'll talk about in a bit, and I got Subnautica.
Yes!
Because Pip and Cool Ghosts finally broke me. Talking constantly about how it's the best game ever.
Did you see my face? I posted a video of it. And it was like, sharing with everyone.
I picked up 4 things so far. I got Darkest Dungeon, which I'll talk about in a bit. Door Kickers, which I've not played yet, but it looks cool. I got the Homeworld Deserts of Karak, which I've only played a couple of minutes of. And I played Rebel Galaxy, which is basically Sid Meier's Pirates, but in space
It
with
sounds
country
like
music.
Star Wars.
It does sound a bit like Star Wars, doesn't it, Pip? I wonder why I clicked that link when it appeared in my feed. A mystery. But it's like a sort of space exploration and sort of freeform, space RPG thing with capital ships on a 2D plane, so everything controls like a battleship. You're steering left and right quite a lot and doing broadsides from your spaceship. I've only played 12 minutes of it and I might never play it again. So that was a sound investment of, 7 quid or something. But that's because, I literally don't understand how people can get past the combat tutorial at all.
I was looking at Homeworld as well, and I'm kind of umming and ahhing about it because I'm reasonably sure that I'll hate the game because I just don't get on with RTSs. But the artwork and the setting is just so exactly my thing.
It is, yeah, I can see that.
And, it's all, or I think, Rob Cunningham is the art lead, or at least one of the founders of the studio that made it, and he's my art dad. I've been obsessed with his drawings and spaceships since he was on the first Homeworld, I think. Definitely Homeworld 2.
Everything in that game looks like a JCB's dream of its future self.
Exactly. It's amazing.
It's by which I mean they're yellow.
There are some red things as well.
That's true, yeah.
And some curved things, which is kind of a step up for him. He's normally been all about chamfered boxes in his spaceships for now, but he's moved on to cylinders, and that's really exciting for me.
It's weird. I've only played the tutorial actually because I didn't really dig into it, but it's very RTS-y. And it's very traditional. I mean, interestingly, moving Homeworld to the ground makes it feel more like a traditional RTS. Who knew? But it immediately feels great in that way that Homeworld did, where little features that probably every RTS should have, like having been playing a lot of Total War recently. Not only can you drag select units, but once you've drag selected them, you can then drag select an attack box for them to tell them, no, just attack this guy. Like, that traditional RTS thing of like, I've got my mob of troops, and then you right click one guy in the enemy unit. and then they'll kill him, and then they'll just like defensively fire back at the others, as if they don't know what their problem is. You can just say, attack everyone in this group, and, let me know when you've won. Okay. And that is a brilliant bit of, like, why doesn't everyone do that kind of design that, the original Homeworld was also very good for. So.
Does it have difficulty modes? Can I play it on easy and literally steamroll with steamrollers?
Yeah, pretty much, I think so, yes. Cool. It's quite fiddly in the way the Homeworld was, because your base is also a big tank, has, energy subsystems and stuff, and is also a factory, and is also your aircraft carrier, and is also a bunch of other things, and the sort of the line of sight terrain system is quite clever. It's the only sort of ground-based RTS I've seen that does terrain as anything other than like really binary planes, where you're like the Warcraft system or the Starcraft system or the Dota system, where it's like, this is low ground, this is higher than this by the same unit as every other piece of higher ground. This is very granular hills. Oh, cool. I mean, they're sand dunes, which is the most granular kind of hill. But, the way elevation works with regards to lines of sight and stuff is all very fiddly. But looks real nice. I'm really waiting for the
Dota equivalent mod for this RTS, so I can be a single JCB.
Or a little buggy. Powers. Yeah. Also, Raphael Sabaj is, I'm pretty sure, the tutorial guy who people will remember as Carthanasi in Knights of the Republic and Caden Alenko in Mass Effect, also known as your boring first male companion in two consecutive BioWare RPGs. So, I greatly enjoyed him ushering me into a new sci-fi experience, as I quietly hope that he's killed. In-game.
Reasonable.
Have you picked up anything, Pip?
So, I picked up Child of Light. I picked up a few things that had a small discount, and I think it was part of the Steam sale, but I sort of was buying them anyway, so it wasn't, so I picked up The Last Leviathan, which is an early access game, which I'll talk about in a moment, but, that had 10% off, and I wasn't sure whether I think that might have been an early access launch thing, rather than being part of the Steam sale. And I can't think of anything else off the top of my head. I know I made a few recommendations, of things that people could buy, because we were doing that, on RPS, so it was things like Regency Solitaire, because that's half price at the moment. And the Stanley Parable, just because if you don't own it, like, why not? And it's £2.
There are a few games like that, actually. Dark Souls is very cheap. Alien Isolation is very cheap. Metal Gear Solid 5 is really cheap. It's like sub a tenner. So if you haven't played any of those games, then definitely, there's a lot of very good. I think
Clean Up Detail has a discount on as well at the moment. So, yeah, so mostly I've just been picking up things that I wanted anyway, and the discount hasn't played a part in that, and in some cases wasn't part of the Steam sale. So I think I've failed at the Steam sale, but Child of Light is my one, I guess.
It's been interesting, so one of the games that I almost bought and then didn't was Stellaris, and I actually really want to play Stellaris, and I intend to get it, but it's not on a lot of sale. It's like £31 down from 40.
Yeah, I saw that, because it was one of those things where Adam talks about it so passionately and loves that kind of game, and if Stellaris had been, slashed in terms of price, I would probably have picked it up just to convince myself that I can play those kinds of games, and I am excited about them, and then bounce off it incredibly hard, but because the reduction was almost nothing, and you can totally understand that given that the game only came out really recently, but it was, that game will very much not be on my radar for a good while.
It was interesting from my view, because I still intend to play it, and I'd like to, but I actually know that I don't have time right now. I don't have time to invest in a grand space strategy game like that. And there are other things I want to play in the short term. So my decision wasn't, I'll wait for a bigger discount later on. It was, I'm actually happy to pay full price for this when I will actually play it, but I'm not willing to pay £30 for it now and lose that money now just so I've got it for the future. It's actually, interesting that it weirdly, and this makes sense really, I suppose, not that profound, but the fact that it hasn't been discounted that much makes the full price less less threatening feeling, you know? It doesn't feel like it's got this sort of Damocles holding onto it where it's hovering above it, where if you don't buy it now, then you're getting screwed out of money in the future.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at earlier. It's like an interesting mental shift, because I noticed myself doing it is sort of thinking, oh, well, it's not actually that discounted, so maybe I'll just pick it up in the future if I change my mind on it and get super excited about it, or, you know, all of those things. But yeah, it's more that I've previously used the Steam sale to try and step out of my comfy genres. And in this one, I haven't really done that for whatever reason, and I think pricing is a big part of it.
Another side of it is that the collapse of initially, you know, THQ and maybe relatedly a studio like, the fact that Saints Row series has ended means there isn't a deep well of, there's a deplenishing reserve of 6 out of 10 action games to impulse buy for £2. Like, I own them all now, and I will never play them, because I'm not Tom Senior, whose life is dedicated to replaying the Darksiders series. And there, you know, it was interesting to see that there's Darksiders 2 again, front page of Steam Sale, as it is its rightful place every year, every season, without fail. But because those games are no longer being generated at the same rate, you know, it's a replenishing stock. And we've got to look to to figure out where the suppliers of, 6 out of 10 Steam sale ware is going to be in the future, you know, like there's dazzlingly high bar, and there's a lot of shit as well, but
I wonder if
no one's occupying that, like,
discounted.
lowercase AAA bracket.
I wonder if Battleborn got discounted, because it feels like it would be a prime candidate in terms of just trying to boost the figures back up on PC, because
Was it actually on Steam? It wasn't through some separate loader or anything?
Yeah, no,
It was on Steam.
It was through Steam, and like the PC user figures, certainly like the daily Steam concurrent players or whatever, kind of fell off a cliff really quickly after launch, and so I was wondering whether they would have used that to try and boost it, but I haven't seen it on the front page, and I haven't seen it sort of in my feeds. And
this is probably a bad thing to admit, but I periodically check in on the Battleborn community to see how they're doing.
I stopped doing that a couple of weeks ago. I think it was around the time that their Reddit threads entered a sort of a trend of, we should stay positive, we should stop the negativity, and really sort of make a conscious effort at positivity. That was the last sort of set of threads that I read on there.
Well, I checked in on them today, actually, and it seemed a lot more positive in that the subreddit was mostly just people talking about experiences they had in the game.
Okay.
Which I don't know why I find this so fascinating. I think it's mostly the trying to see if a game with its business model and its unusual selling point that didn't do well when it came out can actually pull back from the edge, like trying to figure out if it's becoming, if it is a success by its own publisher's metrics and so on, just by looking at how happy people seem. They definitely stopped talking about sales numbers, which is nice. Maybe the light of Overwatch's numbers, that's just a conversation no one wants to have, which I would understand, But yeah, no, I don't think it's been the Steam sale, although it has been steadily discounted very heavily since launch. Like, it went down from full price £40 to full price £25 faster than I'd ever see a game do that.
Yeah. I remember discussion of that one.
I'm possibly this is total speculation, but if they are eyeing a free-to-play model for that game, which would be the logical end game here, then maybe a Steam sale discount isn't that appealing, because they don't want sales. They want as close as they can get to full price purchases ahead of a shift to a different model. Because there's no evidence for that in Battleborn's case, but that would fit what has happened with MMOs that have followed a similar trajectory and so on.
It happened with WildStar, didn't it? So.
Yeah. Which is still kicking around now on Steam.
Yeah. Shall we move on to what we've all been playing then?
Why not?
Given we've teased it. Okay, who wants to go first? Christopher.
Okay.
God,
Boy.
Sorry, I said that out loud, didn't I?
The internet's not going to let that one go.
The thing is That's not even your nickname. That's a nickname that I had for a previous friend called Christopher. And I keep sort of using it accidentally for you. Sorry.
Wow. Do you know what else involves...
For my ex-boss, of all people.
I've been playing a game that involves ceaselessly digging yourself into a deeper, worse hole.
Oh, really? I wonder what relevance that has here.
It's called Darkest Dungeon, and I think Tom Francis spoke about it previously on an episode of the podcast. I know because I was on that episode, but I've forgotten who was talking and largely what they said. Darkest Dungeon is of the 4 games I've bought. I suppose poor door kickers I haven't played yet, so leaving them out. It's the one that I've immediately felt most grabbed by. And, there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that, it's a sort of RPG with some roguelike elements, dungeon crawler thing, but it gets loads of things right that I really value in games like this. So on its surface, it's actually quite a traditional RPG. You have a party of adventurers in a kind of Lovecraftian setting, and you send them, a bit like the first Diablo, into the ruins of what is ostensibly your like family manor that has been ruined by your uncle or somebody's attempt to plumb the depths of Chthonian horror that lurk beneath it. And you're doing this in order to kind of redeem your family or whatever. And so you send your party into like little labyrinths basically that you explore room by room in the kind of manner of traditional dungeon crawler like Grimlock or something like that, where you're kind of plodding from room to room, although it's 2D, so you are walking sort of left to right through each different scene, and then stuff happens and you get into combats and so on, and then you kind of click on the map to determine your next path and you explore these different labyrinths. And so it's got all the sorts of, like, it's got a combat system which is very mechanical and strategic, and it takes a little while to get completely comfortable with, but I think it's the thing Tom was talking about a lot when he was describing it. And I think I might be getting the wrong Tom, but who knows? Or it could have been Graham or Marsh. We'll never know.
Tom Francis being fascinated with the dead body.
Yeah. So your people line up in a line, and you determine where they stand, and then the enemies come at you in a line as well. And different abilities can hit different parts of the line. It's not always necessarily that like range is from back to the back or anything like that. It's often quite specific, so you can hit the third person from the back, and different characters like, different classes like being in different parts of the line and like attacking different parts of the line. Yes, Pip?
Sorry, I put my hand up. I don't know why I did that. I was just wondering, is it like a more complicated version of, you know, the Wii the 3DS Street Pass?
The
Ghost
Street Pass
killing,
quest.
Yeah.
It's actually not totally unlike that.
Okay.
But it's quite a lot more complicated, but not totally unlike that. And so the strategy of it is, your people move at different points based on initiative, and you kind of trade them in and out, and you pick a move for each one of them on each turn, not unlike, like a Final Fantasy based battle system. But, there are also loads of like, positioning really matters, status effects really matter, and also dead bodies matter. So when an enemy dies, they don't leave their spot on the line unless their body is destroyed, which means people don't move up the line. So if you kill the person at the front of the line, or even the first 2 people in the line, and their bodies are still there, you might end up in a situation where your attackers at the front, your melee tanks, can't actually reach the next opponent because there's still stuff in the way. But that's mitigated by, like, if someone is killed with a critical hit, the body is destroyed instantly. If someone dies from bleeding or blight, which is basically poison, then their body dies normally. So it's got a really interesting kind of like strategic thing where, like, it's quite good. The ideal battle is one where you poison everyone to death from the back to the front. So your fighters can just fight the person at the front, and you have like a plague doctor throw poison vials at the back to poison them from the back forwards. But often...
Why is it a plague doctor that's killing people? Is that like a commentary on medieval medicine?
It's because it fits the theme, I suppose. I mean, it's like, I was going to talk a bit more setting because I want to talk about the mechanics first, and then, but like, they do heal as well, but they also attack zombies. It could be that if you heal a zombie, you kill it. Who knows?
Ooh.
And and so they've got this very sort of technical combat system, and it feels like it really rewards learning more about how the different systems and classes interact. And there's and the classes are really interesting. It's not just like warrior, fighter, mage, rogue, that kind of stuff. There's some of that, but they each work slightly differently to how you expect. So, a fighter who can shrug off bleeding feels very different in terms of their dependencies on other characters to a warrior who can stun people or reduce their damage. There's a guy with a dog who's like a hound master who sends his dog to do the attacking for him, but who can hug his dog to heal himself, which is obviously accurate. The dog is very good at applying bleed to an entire line of enemies, much like real dogs do. And so it's got all this technical
Even
elements.
the Pomeranian puppies I was looking at online the other day.
The little floofy Pomeranian puppies.
They're like clouds. It's so weird.
I assume if you get good range on those, they can attack the back lines very easily.
Yeah, you can throw them
like,
if needs be.
You're throwing cotton balls. Oh god, the cotton ball's eating my leg.
Exactly.
I assume you're constructing your lineup out of characters
Yeah.
in reserve or something.
So that's the sort of the battle element, and there's exploring, and then as you're exploring, you're also consuming resources like food and torches and stuff. And that all plays into the game's other really important mechanic, which is stress. So attacks can cause stress, stuff happening to other characters can cause stress, which is a bar that builds up, basically. And you're but then things can relieve, so that some characters can actually actively have abilities that relieve stress either from themselves or other people. But someone getting a critical hit relieves stress on the entire party, which is sort of an interesting kind of, and so what it builds out of a really mechanical system. When I say mechanical, I mean, I don't just mean in terms of it's got lots of game mechanics. I mean, in terms of it could be quite cold and clunky, and if the theme wasn't so sort of heavily laid on top of it, you immediately start to get character from it, which is something I really like. And that plugs into the metagame, which is the town itself, where you unlock buildings as you progress, and those buildings are partly used to recruit new heroes to your pool, and you can take 4 at a time. But you're encouraged to constantly give characters breaks in order to relieve their stress by sending them to do different things in the town. There's an abbey where lots of people can pray, meditate, or flagellate themselves. And there's an inn where people can gamble, drink, and go to the brothel. And there's a few different things like this. So and all these things basically do the same thing. You pay some money, you lose them for the time being until you've completed another mission, and then they come back to you. But the theme, which is this sort of it's sort of quasi-Victorian medieval Lovecraft. It's got knights in armor, but also sort of medieval Victorian grave robbers, and there's a sort of, and then I guess the plague doctors have a kind of creepier, sort of medieval feel to them. So it's sort of not really set in a specific era, but it has this really thick kind of atmosphere around it, which is actually enhanced by the systems rather than drawing away from it.
Well, that's great.
The art is amazing. It's all 2D hand-drawn art. The animation's great. Really good. They've done a great job of selling the impact of blows, even if it's just little paper doll models hitting each other. It has a Bastion style voiceover, which is your uncle, basically your deceased mad uncle kind of commenting on things. I don't know who they do the voice, but it's great.
I went in an Overwatch direction there and was imagining some bleeps and bloops.
No, it's got a bleep bloops from a bullshit robot. No, as in Bastion, as in Logan Cunningham in Supergiant's Bastion talking over, by which I mean it's like a reactive narration, so it's not.
Oh, okay. I thought you just meant that it was like being in a Western. Maybe someone would say that it was High Noon, and I realised that I've also gone back to Overwatch with that, so.
I mean, you like how, Bastion obviously had, fiction narration, as this does, for narrative bits, but it also had things that he would say, in relation to things that happen in battle.
Yeah.
Or whatever. It's got that sort of thing in it, so as you kind of explore, it'll say something like a slow death as an enemy succumbs to poison or something like that. And you do hear the same lines on and off, but it's enough to kind of give it this kind of quite rich atmosphere. But also as your characters, progress, they pick up traits that affect them in various ways. And if you, and these can be bad. So you'll have a character, for example, who is like has the trait fears God, and they will only be able to relieve stress by meditating, or praying. And you have fixed slots for those things. So it's like a character trait that sort of gets attached to that person, but, like it limits how you sort of shuffle them around like a game piece outside of the game as well. And I had a knight who had also had the trait, a trait that meant that he was selfish and occasionally would steal things. And that would mean that sometimes while walking around, if we walk past some treasure, like a thing would appear above his head and he'd just take it. And it would show me what he took, but all the inventory items would be grayed out because it would go into his inventory that I don't have access to, not mine. Because he would just sometimes take something for himself. And they start to act a little bit autonomously. And if they get really stressed out, if the stress bar fills once, they get like, I don't know the word they use in the game is basically tested. Like they enter this moment of like personal crisis and they either come out of it stronger or weaker, which is interesting. So that you'll see them have this like crisis. And sometimes you'll have someone get, like I had my Houndmaster go through this crisis and then come out, fearful as a new trait. And he immediately shuffles himself to the back of the line and he starts talking to his dog. Like in the combat sequence, he's sort of saying like, you know, I want to get to the back. I want to get to the back. And if someone else gets injured, he'll comment on it saying like, well, I don't want that to happen to me. That could have been me. And it starts to affect their trait. But I also had a cool, like kind of, lady barbarian warrior woman who was my frontliner in one particular mission, go through that crisis and come out like furiously angry, but in a positive way. And it meant that she just kicked ass for the rest of the dungeon. And it kind of gives you a sense of, it's not like a lot of detail, but it's slightly more than like maybe XCOM gives you about who your people are.
I was going to say it sounds almost as good as, or possibly better at generating those characters and small stories, as XCOM does.
And just because it gives them a little bit of their own voice as well. And it's sort of like, you know, I had a character read a book and then become phobic of specifically the next area I was supposed to visit. And it's like the knowledge he's gained has corrupted him and stuff like that.
Yeah.
The other thing about it is, it just in terms of the tone of the writing is really good. And it's like, even though like, you know, I did my dissertation on Lovecraft, I'm kind of into that stuff. I actually don't like a lot of Lovecraftian themes in games a lot of the time. If it's a bit like steampunk, like if it's amazing and seamlessly integrated with the story people want to tell, it's fine. If it's just a gloss over something, then I really don't care for it. Like
it's cogs stuck onto top hats.
Yeah, I really don't like it. Likewise, if you just do Lovecraft as tentacles stuck onto people, then, I don't massively care for it. And whereas this actually, whereas this actually kind of, there is a bit, you know, tentacles stuck onto people-y, but it doesn't, partly the use of language is pretty spot on. Like they use a lot of, and I think very self-consciously drop a lot of very Lovecraftian adjectives. Those things are antediluvian and cyclopean a lot. But also, it feels sort of hopeless. Like people just sort of march out of this stagecoach in the village where you can go between every mission just to top up on characters, like level 0 characters. They march out and they just march in and sometimes you lose them. And the nice thing about it, maybe as a roguelike, is losing your best person or losing a good person just feels like, oh well. Because often they will have picked up, on the way to dying, they will have revealed something of themselves. Like, they'll have turned into a totally crackers, craven shitbag by the time they finally die. So the point where you don't miss them as much, and that feels deeply Lovecraftian to like no longer really give two shits about the person that has just been like poisoned to death by a skeleton.
Have they tried to assign the player a role or a presence in this?
You're kind of unseen floating presence. You're essentially a character in it because you are the heir of the manor, essentially, that's here to redeem it or reclaim it or something. But,
Can you reclaim it?
I guess that's what happens if you beat the game.
But like, cause it sounded for a moment like maybe it just goes on and on and on, like maybe there's an endless mode. Or...
I think it's finite.
Okay.
But it's certainly sprawling. And then the most recent thing that I did in it was I was exploring the dungeon and you hit objects like maybe like a corrupted shrine, and you might be able to spend an object from your inventory sort of speculatively to see if you can get something better out of it. So if you use holy water in certain states, you can turn what would have been a bad interaction with the environment to a good interaction. I hit this thing I'd never seen before, which is like this sort of glowing red orb suspended in like a black nether tendril. And it said something like, you know, I don't know, submit fire to witness true horror or something like that. Or to witness the true horror of the void. And I felt like, that video game thing where it's like, well, if I can do it, I should do it. Cause, whatever. So rather than just click on it normally, I dragged a torch onto it, like a flaming torch. And immediately, like, the world collapses. All my party falls into the void where 5 minutes later they finish being melted by a space horror. And I lost all of them, including my best guy, who had by the end revealed himself to be a craven shitbag. So,
to be fair, it did warn you.
It did warn me.
It really did.
Yeah, it was like the only bad things will happen if you do this. I think it explicitly says. I'm like, I want to see. It's like,
yeah, that's how a run. I've forgotten the Untersea.
Sunless Sea.
That's how one run of Sunless Sea ended. With me reaching an island where there was one thing to do, and the text said, "Absolutely, do not do this." So I clicked, I want to do this. It says, you really do not want to do this. And I did, and suffered the consequences.
Yeah. Actually, I would say that not only is Sunless Sea and Fallen London generally a good example of this stuff on the whole, I think this makes for a fair comparison. Not in terms of storytelling, because it doesn't have as much prose as Sunless Sea. It's not a choose your own adventure in the same way. Well, it does have is a really good combat system, which Sunless Sea doesn't. But it manages to strike a similar atmosphere, I think, which is nice to see. And it has, I think they had some clay, thanked on the game's splash screen. And it has that polish feeling that, like, Invisible Ink has and Don't Starve and games like that. It has that sort of level of design, shininess, finesse to it. So yeah, I really like it. And, I can see it definitely becoming like I'll just do one run dungeon game for a good while yet. The only downside is that the developer Red Hook named themselves after Lovecraft's worst and most racist story, Horror at Red Hook. They could have picked any of them. They picked that one.
Is there not another thing that Red Hook could mean?
In that context, I feel like it's quite unlikely.
Okay.
I think it might be it's a reference to part of Brooklyn, I think, because that's where the story is set, or part of New York at least. So maybe they're just from there and it's a coincidence that Lovecraft's worst and most racist story is.
Because I was thinking it might be a Nick Cave reference, but that's a Red Right Hand, which is entirely different, unless you're Captain Hook, in which case it then becomes crossover fiction. And
yeah, I think it's actually, you're probably right. It is more likely that it's Captain Hook, Nick Cave / fic.
Oh, I'm going to Google for that later. John, what have you been playing?
SteamWorld Heist, which is similarly a side-on turn-based tactical kind of game, but it sounds like it's completely the opposite kind of tone to that, where you take your jaunty band of steampunk robots.
I was just thinking the word jaunty.
Roaming across the galaxy.
Sorry.
That's right. Yeah, it plays quite a lot like a cross between Worms and XCOM, like later XCOM. In that your crew of like 1 to 4 people you can take on a mission, and you send them in initially against the dastardly Scrapper gang, and you're moving through a ship. You have your move action and then your shoot action, and just like XCOM, it's kind of clearly delineated. You can move this far before you can take a shot, or you can double move if you're sprinting to cover, and there's high and low cover and so on. But a really nice twist on that is when you dive in cover and you're ready to take your shot, it's manually aimed, much like Worms. So you're like rotating your gun up and down, trying to get the arc right, or the line right, but it doesn't have a crosshair. All you're doing is lining up the angle of your weapon and thinking, that looks about right, and firing and hoping for best. And it's got a little bit of wiggle on it there. There's kind of like a little bit of hand bob that goes up and down. So there's a bit of skill to when you actually take that shot as well, which is nice to have that kind of immediate feedback thing combined with the tactical layer as well. Yeah, and that's kind of mixed up by interesting objectives, and the levels, they're kind of quite linear as it is trying to tell a story, but the actual levels themselves are randomly generated. So if you do mess up and you go back, then you'll have a similar objective like destroy the shield generators and then grab all the loot and evacuate. But it'll be a different layout this time and so on. And yeah, it's kept on the tactical layer is made interesting. Like XCOM, you have as you build up your squad out of different characters with different abilities. Like you have your kind of assault tank guys who kind of regenerate damage and do more damage after they've been hit. They kind of get adorably angry and shout and do more damage. It's brilliant. But the best class is Sniper. And so I think all of the weapons in the game, apart from explosives, can ricochet around the levels. So if you're really good, you can kind of line up a shot and bounce it off the ceiling and hit someone in the top of the head as they're kind of hiding behind cover. But the Sniper gets to use weapons which have like a laser sight on. And that works like the cheating mode in like snooker and pool games.
Right.
So you can see where the shot is going to bounce to like an absurd degree, like 7 walls it's going to bounce off and then hit someone in the arse. And it's brilliant. It's incredibly well used by one of the bosses as well. So sort of minor mechanical spoilers, but there's a boss in it and he's such a dick. It actually makes you laugh. And it's through a purely mechanical way in that, he's a sniper as well. And he's got, this really elegant long gun with a scope on top of it. And he only does 1 damage every go. But he bounces, his shot off at least 10 walls and it always hits you in the foot. He's just a complete dick about it. And that means that you're immobilized for the next round. So there's stuff to think about. But yeah, he just walks in the opposite direction of the fight, faces away from your party and shoots the wall in front of him and it pings around like the most annoying guy who knows all the trick shots in pool or whatever. But yeah, it's great.
Oh, yeah, it's like, you're gonna win. There's no need to be a dick about it, those pool guys.
Stupid pool guy.
Oh.
When you said it's linear, is it like a story campaign then? The XCOM stuff is just in the individual missions, or is there like a meta?
Yeah, there's no sort of strategy layer, as you refer to it in XCOM. It's there's kind of a nice map, and you feel like you're choosing the next direction to go, and there's little hubs along the way, there's little inns where steampunk robots are playing in a band and serving drinks and so on. And there's challenge missions as well, which are off from the main path, which have all the best loot in and so on. But yeah, it's a fairly linear progression through the game. And it doesn't feel awful because it's giving you a new challenge every time, and it's really kind of pick up and play. You can just do one mission isn't going to last longer than like the longest you'll ever do is like 5 minutes long. So you can just pick it up and say, I just want to do one mission and play through and have fun and then bail out whenever you want. Which I don't think it would be able to do if you had to take stock of your whole empire or whatever and make important choices about what mission you were going to do next, whatever. But yeah.
What kind of steampunk is it?
Well, I would call it diesel punk, if not for the fact that the robots literally have steam engines built into them. So it's...
Are there different kinds of steampunk?
There are. Diesel punk
I did not know this.
Is a subtle difference, and the clue's in the name, really. But its styling is more to do with, like, early motor cars and so on.
Okay, so sort of the 1920s-ish.
Yeah,
maybe.
Still got a lot of style, but it's, to use a wanky art term, it's often quite deconstructionist.
Okay.
So all the cowling is off the motor cars and so on. You can see all the pipes and the gaskets and so on. And everyone's quite dirty, with scarves and goggles and that sort of thing on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Steampunk's generally a bit more...
It's more Victorian.
Whimsical and Victorian and sort of idealistic.
Yeah.
I had to dress in steampunk for a wedding once.
Who was getting married?
A couple of friends who were really into steampunk stuff. But, like, I had to learn what in my wardrobe might a stretch be useful for this at the moment's notice. I think I went with a top hat and a kind of corsety, like black, like I looked like a school teacher almost, but with a top hat on. Like, you know, one of those like high-necked frilly blouses.
Yeah.
And like.
It's quite good steampunk.
Yeah.
I think you see some terrible steampunk where people do stick cogs on top hats and so on. I think the best steampunk I've ever seen was by a high fashion designer I can't remember the name of. Begins with P, possibly. Anyway.
Peter Pillotti?
No,
Phoebe Philo?
Anyway, they did an amazing range of suits. They had like the guy who plays Billy Elliot, I forgot his name, and
is it Jamie something?
Yeah, Jamie. They got like
Sorry, we're doing really well.
We do not know.
This is going really badly. I should never have mentioned it. I might try and find the link because it's the best steampunk in the world because it has absolutely no cogs or anything on it. It's like Victoriana influenced, incredibly stylish suits and so on.
So you're essentially not into the whole caught in a watch factory explosion side of...
That's lazy steampunk.
Uh-huh. I see.
But talking about hats...
which we were.
There is an amazing system with hats in SteamWorld, where it's the one kind of visual customization thing that you get. And the only way you get new ones is by shooting them off the heads of your enemies. You literally ping them off with your revolver or whatever and then go and pick them up and then they're yours now. And you can't do it at the same time as you're dealing damage to someone. So you're choosing between shooting this robot on the head or getting its hat. Which is just brilliant sort of risk reward.
What do you get for having the hats? Or is that
absolutely
obvious?
Nothing?
Just the hats?
Yeah, it's the Team Fortress model of hattery.
But
also the real life model of hattery, to be fair.
Presumably if you snatch its hat, you can still then take the headshot. It's more if you don't get the hat and you don't take the headshot.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's...
That would lead to
it's a
scrapes.
slightly harder shot. And it acts as like a consolation prize as well. Sometimes, so you miss your shot, but you get a hat out of it as well.
How many hats can you wear at
just
any
one
one
at a time? It's a really missed opportunity.
That would be rubbish. Like, imagine if you could massacre an entire room of robots and then just walk out with a really you'd have to duck as you left the room because you were wearing so many hats.
I assume now you've said that they'll patch it in.
Yeah.
It'd be a good mark of your lethality.
Yeah.
How many, the precarious pile of hats, and also how much you stood to lose. A bit like...
A hat trick.
Is it in Game of Thrones where the Dothraki don't cut their hair unless they're defeated, or is that something else?
I think it's Game of Thrones.
Yeah. It sounds like that.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah, if you're wearing a precarious pile of hats, that means you've never been defeated in single combat.
They put bells in it? You get a bell for every rider you cut down, isn't it? Like they braid bells into their hair.
Yeah, so they jingle fabulously as...
I'm not
remember.
making this up.
No, you're not. No,
Someone else made it up and then I repeated it. George R.R. Martin.
Indeed.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's got a few interesting risk-reward systems like that. It's got also similar to XCOM 2. You occasionally get missions with alarm states, where sometimes it's similar to that instant fail thing that XCOM does. But often it's a lot softer in that the longer you take, the more reinforcements are going to turn up and the more defences that there are. So it does, which combined with loot, which you actually have to go and physically put up, you do get into interesting situations where you kind of overextend yourself because you want the shiny thing. And then the countdown's ticking and you think you can just make it to the escape pod. And yeah, it's good stuff. It's like a really direct counter to Dex, which I talked about last week, which was lots and lots of very sort of far-reach or grasping systems. They wanted to be Deus Ex, so they had all the Deus Ex systems, and they kind of pulled them off, sort of a little bit shonkily, whereas this is much more tightly designed and really well executed. Yeah, it's a really good game.
And it's in the same cell.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. For some pounds.
Some pounds. Under a tenner, I think.
I think Darkest Dungeon's £11 in the sale, down from 18, so not like the most massive deal, but top stuff. What have you been playing and sinking this week, Pip?
Oh. I was about to try and get out of it and say, well, I've been playing Tilt Brush, actually.
You have, yeah. You did get the old VR setup.
Yeah. Although one of the base stations is kind of screwed, so every now and again the room felt like it was just tipping slowly onto one side, which was awful. It was like being in hell. And you'd have to sort of shut your eyes and wait until it righted itself again.
Good old VR.
Yeah.
Flawless.
So I can talk about that, about drawing in space, or I can talk about, sinking things.
Tell us about sinking things, Pip.
So I picked up The Last Leviathan just because I fancied building a ship one afternoon, and also because eventually there will be sea monsters. There aren't at the moment, but I kind of figured that I'd get in on the ground floor of that.
So hang on, so the game's called The Last Leviathan, but they haven't added the sea monsters yet.
Well,
Will
no.
it then be the first Leviathan?
Well, no, because, like, you have to give them time to come up from the depths. Don't you?
Sure.
Also, you have to give them time to be built.
I imagine the dev studio is just in a blind panic saying, I thought you were doing Leviathan.
I thought the game was called We'll Do the Leviathan Last.
So that's not in it, and like multiplayer stuff isn't in it, but you can go into creative mode and build a ship. And what it does is it starts you off in a sort of, not even a dry dock, it just starts you off with a cube that has, a ship's wheel sort of floating in the middle of space, and then you build around it from that. So I sort of built a deck out of crates, but then I realised that there was actual decking because I hadn't scrolled along. So I got rid of all the crates, and then I used sort of really jaunty red and white checked floor to sort of build my ship. And then I used some sort of triangular prism kind of crates to build what seemed like a pleasingly sloping hull. And like I added like a keel and another nautical words and a prow. And some fancy balustrade stuff.
Balustrade?
Yeah, like around the edge of the decking. With like little shields on it, you know? Like to stop people falling off. Stop the rum falling off. I put a barrel of rum on there. I didn't really know what any of it was like the purpose of, but you know, I was sort of just floating the ship in the air and building merrily. And then when you're happy with how it might have gone, I jammed 2 sails on it, and then I was like, launch! And then it plopped into the sea, and it stayed pretty much half submerged because I hadn't really understood the weight side of things, and I hadn't really understood the metrics, I guess, that it sort of gives you as you build. And so, you know, I think
kind of balancing of buoyancy versus weight.
Well, I think there was like, and one of the things was like power, and I think that might have been linked to like weight. So I guess like the heft with which you can ram things as well, because ultimately it's that you build a ship, but then you use it to try and take down other ships, or I guess deal with leviathans that may or may not exist, and you know, pick up stuff that's in the sea and all of that kind of stuff. And so I think I hadn't really got the hang of that, but I figured it doesn't seem to be sinking, so I'm going to try and drive around. And then I wasn't really moving because I didn't really understand how the wind worked. And then it started going backwards. And then I added 3 propellers because it was like, you have no propulsion. And I was like, good point. Very good point. So I went back into build mode and jammed 3 little propellers on the back. And then it turned out they were a lot bigger than I thought and like really powerful. And so I was just pressing, because it's WASD kind of controls. And so just pressing W meant I was kind of doing ship wheelies because I was going too fast. So I was like, and then but it interacted with the fluid dynamics, and so I kept coming completely out of the water, and splooshing back in, and so I wasn't entirely in control, and then I crashed into a beach. And there endeth my ship experience, and I wrote it all down for RPS dutifully. And I guess, I did want to go back to it and try and improve on my...
I don't know how you could improve on that design.
Improve on my shipbuilding, but I mean, more to improve on understanding what it wanted from me, I think. And maybe start small and maybe build a raft or something, and then see how that worked and how you could then add more to it, and how to maybe steer a bit using the sails with less, I guess, weight to have to take into consideration and stuff.
Presumably, if you got straight to
Oh, there were also cannons on it. I added them. They were mostly decorative cannons because I still wasn't really sure what I was doing, but I put one on each side for balance.
Presumably, if you were able to build a galleon, even a shit galleon that didn't work, then the building tool has to be quite straightforward.
Are you calling my ship a shit galleon?
I probably just did, yeah.
Oh, well, so it's just quite it's a blocky system, so it's reminiscent of something like Minecraft or any number of other things that use your construction ability in relation to a block or an existing kind of, thing. And then you just hook everything else onto that and can reorient it, sort of twiddle it around in 3D space according to where it would join. So you can move it clockwise and anti-clockwise and stuff to fiddle a bit with the pieces. Although I had to sort of, game it a bit in places, it wasn't quite latching onto the thing that I thought it should, and then you'd have to sort of wiggle around a bit, or you'd have to delete the block next to it that was causing the problem and then add that one in and then try and retrofit the middle bit back on and stuff like that. So yeah, but it was really simple to be able to build something that looked vaguely like a ship. But getting it to function more like a ship was slightly more complicated than I'd been expecting.
Are there mechanical systems? Do you actually have to link the wheel to the rudder or anything like that?
No. I'm not sure what it would have done if I hadn't had a rudder, whether it would have just been harder to steer, because I kind of tried to go through everything that was on the list of compartments and just sort of, I guess, use common sense to see what was needed. So I had the 2 sails, and I had the keel kind of bits to hopefully keep it going in a smooth direction and to help with that side of things. But there was also a rudder that I assumed that the game just sort of automagically connects up to whatever else. And then with the propellers, I just jammed them on. There's no, engineering required. It is just sort of more like a Lego thing, I guess.
Does it feel like it has the potential of something like Kerbal or the Siege weapon building game?
Besiege.
For those crazy builds, or...
People have mentioned Besiege a few times in the comments. I haven't actually played that, so I'm not entirely sure. It's sort of... to my mind, is maybe more like what I've seen in videos of something like, is it Worlds Adrift? That game where you build airships out of stuff and then fight people using them. So it's kind of more in that vein, I think, than, but I think you definitely could build wacky ships and things if they added the more components or all of that kind of stuff.
You're not going to cruise across the sea and see a huge mechanical scorpion coming at you from the horizon, right?
Oh, that would be amazing. Maybe you could build a Leviathan. That would be pretty good. There is another game that I think it's called Pioneers, which is also in that vein of building vehicles and taking them off exploring and all of that kind of stuff. And I think it's only just been announced, and it's by a studio called Lightbulb, which is some of the people who were involved in Kalimba, if you ever played that. And so that looked more kind of, yeah, like you build a vehicle and then take it off and you do things. And so I think maybe that's a genre that, I mean, people have been exploring it for a while, but it does feel like that there will be a glut of games in that general area. But I went for this one because sea monsters.
Does it feel like something you'd want to wait a fair while before going back to? Or you're going to stick with it as it develops?
I might try and build a couple more ships just so that I understand the basic systems in play. And then I'll probably leave it fallow for a while and then check in on the major updates as they go along and see what's been implemented at various points. As soon as there's a Kraken, I'm all in. But yeah. So yeah, and the other thing that I've been playing is Tilt Brush, which is the 3D drawing
Google's
VR
thing.
Experience by the Google.
You made a very good tree.
I did. Yeah, no, that was fun actually. Have you played it, John?
No, I'm really interested in trying it out.
Yeah, if you don't mind the room falling over every now and again, then this is the place. It's an interesting one because it does feel intuitive very quickly. And, I think once I'd worked out what I wanted to do, because I think when I went to see it in demo form when I was in Seattle, and, you know, you have like 2 minutes with it or whatever, and then your brain goes into panic mode and you're like, what the hell do I draw? You know, there's someone watching me and judging me, and like, I think I just sort of ended up drawing a flower and then just experimenting with some of all of the different effects and just seeing what each one did so that I had at least a grounding in what was going on. But this was very much a kind of, I want to see if I can create a thing that feels like I think I wanted to see whether I could create something that felt like a theatre set or something, or a stage set, where you could actually feel like you were inside an environment almost, but have it be stylized. I don't know if that makes sense, but, and so I figured I'd just sort of create a tree, and see what happened, because I spend quite a lot of time outside looking at them, and so I'm kind of quite comfy with the basic shapes and
Oh no, trees are fuckers.
It's weird, isn't it? Like, cause, you know, you say that and then you suddenly realise that you don't know how branches work at all and how the basic shapes are, but...
That's why we have Speed Tree.
Yeah.
But, I kind of know enough that I can bodge together at least a thing that you look at it and you know that it's trying to be a tree. And so then it was more about experimenting with different sizes of leaves that the leaf brush will spit out, and sort of how that will affect how dense something looks and how you can augment the shading, because there are light sources within the environment, within the 3D space. And so it's casting a shadow as you draw and as you sort of fill in even more. But you can then augment the lighting by adding darker bits and sort of really, you know, accentuating the shade, and then sort of adding the lighter parts to add some of that texture and sort of focus as well, which was kind of, it was just really interesting to play around with it, I guess, and then to see what other people had done with it. But, yeah, like, one of the things that I realized while playing around with it was that it's odd trying to create something slightly bigger than human scale in something that has been designed for humans. And so, because I was sort of only able to do the bits of the tree that I could reach. And so I did actually, like, at one point with the Vive over my eyes, like, felt my way over to where I knew there was a chair in the room. And, like, I was about to bring it over, but then the room did the tipping over to the side thing, and I was like, I'm going to die if I get on this chair when I can't see what's going on, and the VR will freak out. So, but yeah, so it kind of made me wonder whether like, there will be any ways to alter where you are standing in 3D space, like whether you could maybe move the floor level up so that you can work on the taller bits for a while.
Seems like they could mess with the scale of you or the scale of your painting as well.
Yeah, like I don't know if there's a way to do that in the game already, but there didn't seem to be anything on my little palette that's on your second VR controller on the Vive that would actually indicate that. So yeah, so because at one point I was wondering like whether you could create like a proper forest that sort of really spun off into the distance overhead, but or anything that actually dwarfed you, I guess. But yeah, so it was a really interesting experience, and I also I was saying this on RPS, but you become really aware of how your arm moves as a whole, and that might sound really odd, but when you draw on paper or something, the paper or the easel that you're working on pushes back and it provides that resistance, and so you're never quite working with the entire arc of your arm. Otherwise you'd only touch it like for a fraction of a second.
Yeah.
But when you're in 3D space, there's no resistance, and so the easiest thing to do is to go with gravity and just properly like swing your arm. And so you're sort of trying to work out how to make that work for you. Otherwise your arm gets really tired because you're sort of permanently having to hold it or like modulate it. And so that was interesting because it worked when I was going from the tree trunk to the roots and having the roots spread out below me. But then if I wasn't careful, the other thing where you go up and it comes back towards you was like, oh, so I guess I'm just sort of like putting all of these branches at the exact same height and like they're all forming this like neat canopy just 6 foot in the air. So
Pip, is the thing where you're trying to draw on, if you were trying to make something like look like it was drawn on a flat surface, but obviously there's no resistance there, is that an area where, for example, mime training might come in handy?
Oh,
were someone to have mime training.
Oh, for God's sake. You're just,
I'm literally trying to find an application for a part of my misspent youth, okay?
He's officially mime trained. I found this out when I was pretending to do miming, and then he was like, actually, I think that's not how you do it.
You don't really look like you're trapped in a box. I'm trapped in a box.
It's like,
I wish that was a lie.
Yeah, it's so cool. But yeah, I don't
No,
know.
that was a serious question though.
I think so, because I think it's more about sort of, I think that the control that you have over your body for doing mime is a useful, good thing, and you would have a steady hand and you would have an understanding of spatial relationships and things. But I think, there is a kind of, I don't know, it's odd because it's more about sort of, I think it would help in terms of making the basic shapes of things, but only if you could get in the hang of, making those with essentially the end of a stick, whereas mime is a lot about moving your entire hand and tracing out the shape through the curvature of that or the resistance that you're putting through that. And so for example, I was trying to make a little mushroom that would go on the forest floor, and it was really difficult because of the way the base station's not working at the moment. But sort of trying to trace out that the hump of the top of the mushroom, and sort of like a kind of a curve, like a normal distribution graph or something. And then sort of trying to do that many times, just sort of gradually rotating on the spot so that you could actually carve out that thing in 3D space. Whereas I think if you were doing it in mime, you could just, actually trace out the space with your fingers and be far less aware of that intricate need to repeat.
And also the paddle itself, I guess.
Yeah, I think that would probably get in the way for somebody who was trying to replicate the teachings of the mime.
The timeless art of mime. Oh boy.
Shall we do questions?
Sure.
Yes.
I've got them right here.
Ooh.
Almost like I prepared this recently?
Maybe one week we should do statements.
Statements from statements.
Yeah. Or jokes.
We try and do jokes throughout the pod.
Yeah, but proper jokes. Who's first? Sorry.
Andrew.
This is going well.
Andrew writes, Dear Crates. Oh, hang on, fuck that up. Anyway, you were discussing the difficulties with creating a game which the player pulls off a con a few weeks ago, and I've been wrestling with a similar problem for a while. I've been working on a co-op tabletop game in the style of a heist movie. Players scout the target, collect the equipment they need, plan and execute the heist. The problem I struggle with is the lack of a twist. In most heist stories, there's the moment when some series of seemingly innocuous actions earlier are revealed to be essential to the plan, allowing the good guys to win in the face of defeat. This is a problem in my game, of course, because the players can't both have a high level of agency and be surprised by the twist. He says, incidentally, your discussion on the potential of a wrestling game that focuses on how pro wrestling actually works might have helped solve my problem. By reframing it so that the players are essentially making a heist movie, when the twist happens, the players won't be surprised, but will hopefully be excited about the narrative that they've come up with. So thanks for that. Anyway, he goes on to say, video games often solve this issue, which I guess he's identifying as the problem of player characters needing to be surprised by, like, the player needing to be surprised by something the player character has done, through the use of amnesiac player characters. Can the Crate and Crowbar team think of any games that solved the problem in another way, or implemented amnesia particularly well? Thanks and keep on podin'. Andrew from Atlanta, Georgia. Lovely Atlanta.
What a lovely aquarium you have.
Best aquarium I've been to.
Mmm.
Top beluga whales.
Not one, not two, not three, but 4 whale sharks.
Have you done Monterey Bay, though?
No.
No, I
so
follow
you've got
them on Twitter
sea
and on
otters.
Instagram.
Didn't. Anyway.
They have sea otters.
This is what the question was about.
Sea otters all over the place. So, well.
I think there's kind of a problem in giving too much agency and then still wanting them to be surprised. I think he has to actually accept that the unknown should be allowed to happen at some point. And with cons in general, it made me think of a pen and paper role-playing game called Fiasco, which is all about... it's got loads of different scenarios. There's cons and getaways and murders on board ships and so on. But halfway through, you roll on a tilt table where a combination of factors combine to make something go horribly wrong. And then people have to respond to that, which might not be exactly what he wants in the game. It sounds like he wants to make everything sort of meticulously planned out, but it seems like it's a good, it'd be a good flow to have all the planning stage and then something goes wrong and then you're reacting to something instead.
I don't, I guess maybe I've missed something, or maybe it was a pod that I wasn't on or have misremembered, but I don't see what the problem would be in having the player character be one of the people who didn't know about the betrayal or the twist or whatever the thing was in the heist.
It's because of a very specific beat in heist or con movies like Ocean's 11, where essentially, I don't know, it's almost like, and it's because in those movies a lot of the time your perspective is as the audience becomes detached from any of the individual characters, unless there's a character kind of in with the heist who doesn't know the whole plan, which is the sort of typical video game protagonist sort of position. And it's that thing of realizing that, I'm trying to think of the best example of this I've seen recently. There's a movie it's not a brilliant movie, but it does this particular thing quite well, with Will Smith and Margot Robbie, called Focus. It's the definition of a movie you would watch on a plane.
I haven't seen it.
I shouldn't really spoil it. There's a good moment of realizing that, like, the thing that's actually happening in the present to the characters is part of a far bigger and more elaborate, even though it looks like everyone's reacting, they're actually acting on a premeditated script that's far more complicated than it looks in the moment. And those moments work in movies because you don't see the setup. Like a video game character necessarily sees all the preparation, and well, Ray was standing over there earlier holding a sign that said this, and this was because of this. Like, those movies work because they reveal to you after the fact what has already happened, and that is very hard to do in a game, so I kind of see where he's coming from with that.
I think there's something to be said for sort of you having access to the things that your character would know, but that therefore not being the complete set of information. And so what I mean by that is the same person who did Fiasco also created a game called, I think it's Out of Dodge, and you play as one of 4 characters after a heist has gone wrong. And you're in a getaway car, like, trying to get away, and everybody has particular information. Some of it is secret, some of it is, your code names and stuff, so people do know that. And so there's interactions within that. I mean, it broadly just sort of tells you your character, and then you just get on with it, and it ends when it ends, it's that pen and paper thing of, okay, well, we've exhausted this and it feels like a natural conclusion. But there are some of the things in there that are the hidden bits of information where, for example, one of you is trying to do a thing, but you don't know that if you do that, then it triggers something else in another character. And so obviously that means that it becomes harder to replay that stuff. But the idea of everybody sort of having knowledge of their character, but that being incomplete kind of means that I can maybe see that working for online multiplayer stuff. Not necessarily in the same way as roleplay, because I think people aren't incentivized in that same way when they're not around a table and not all sort of buying into that scenario. But if you just give them different win conditions, and if you give them different, resources and things like that, then that can be, I think, quite interesting. I think one of our friends was talking about Space Janitor, maybe? Is that something like that? Where
Space Station 13, where you can be a janitor.
That's the one. Yeah.
I was thinking just...
Because isn't that like somebody is sabotaging something in that sometimes?
You can be, yeah. All sorts of things can have such a big simulation. I was actually thinking about how to solve this specific game design problem, and an answer might come from the Numenera role-playing system, or the Cypher system, as it's now more broadly called. Where you can, it would work in collaboration with the GMs, and I don't know if the tabletop game he's creating has a GM, but when you level up or you get a new skill in that game, there's sort of system whereby you can spend less XP to get the skill if you can justify why you've got it. And it's to encourage players to not just say, I can pick locks now, but to actually use the active leveling up to flesh out their character's history.
Yeah.
So, the way it technically works is you can take a weaker version of the skill by localizing it through context. So you can say, I'm good at picking these specific locks because my dad made them, and you've added that detail. And the thing that keeps it in check is you can't contradict yourself, and the GM is there to kind of back it up. So if you think, if you want to get your party, this is in the context of not a heist, but I think it would apply. In that game, it's like you want to get your party through a treacherous mountainous terrain more easily. And so you spend some XP to say, well, actually, my character grew up in land just like this and spent most of his life alone in the wilderness wandering around. And so he's actually an expert at navigating this type of terrain, and that's going to help us in this particular scenario. You can't then later spend some more XP to say, well, my character's experience growing up on the streets and spending his entire life in the streets has made him really good at navigating this city, because it contradicts the thing you said first. So once you said something, you've committed to it. And I was thinking in a heist scenario, you could do that by saying, like, the party approaches the locked door that has, the guard and the double lock and the key card or whatever. And then someone can say, okay, well, at 10 o'clock last night, I, punctured the tires on the guard's car, so the guard couldn't show up to work today, and the guard is actually my mate Trevor, and he's going to let us in.
Yeah.
But once you've committed that, you've committed to what happened at, 9 o'clock last night, and you've also committed to where Trevor is, and then you can't change those things. And so you're doing the heist thing of seeing the details in flashback, but as you go through it.
Yeah.
And so the game would be about spending your resources retrospectively to solve the problems you encounter as they happen. I don't know if that would solve the problem of presenting players with a twist, but in a cooperative game, that would at least allow you to recreate the effect of a heist movie.
Yeah. The only other thing that's come to my mind as we've been talking is the Battlestar Galactica board game, where, because in the first half of the game, really, everyone's fine, aren't they? I think, and then
they're a bit Cylon-y, but yeah.
But you know what I mean. And then in the next bit of the game, then you might or might not become a Cylon, and then there's this sort of atmosphere of trying to figure out who might be sabotaging the ship because they've sort of activated or they've realized themselves who they are, or all of that kind of stuff. And I think obviously that works within that world's particular fiction a bit better, but I think that there's something to be said for that kind of maybe building in a way, not of amnesia, but just of why you might not know why you're sabotaging these things. Sort of having a moment where you become cognizant of the awful things that you might have done in your sleep, or, while sort of in this other state of consciousness.
Like in the Battlestar game, it works by activating where there's a chance halfway through the game that more Cylons will be active.
That's the one.
It doesn't change the ones that are already active.
I'd forgotten how it worked. I couldn't remember if everyone was fine at the start and they were just trying to survive, or whether...
At the start, there's a fixed number of Cylons based on how many players there are. Then halfway through the game, you draw another set of cards, and there's a chance there that you end up with someone who's just a Cylon twice. And then they're definitely a Cylon.
Double
Or
Cylon.
someone picks up someone who was previously human picks up a Cylon card, and they find out that they're a Cylon midway through the game. So the scenarios are almost slightly different, because then it's a player who has previously been trying to help the humans has to start discreetly undermining them without revealing that their destiny has changed halfway through.
Yeah.
That's an interesting mechanic, I think, because it means that your win condition changes halfway through the game. And so at the start of the game, if you want to win, you have to kind of be ready for the idea that the things you were doing to win in the first half of the game might make it harder to win in the second.
In that case, I was misremembering it.
But it's still an interesting way of creating a twist within the game that still gives the players agency and affects the whole game in a positive way.
And I think there are games that do sort of have a chance to affect your character partway through anyway. So those are all.
There's a lot of good variants on Werewolf as well, where things like that happen, where it's possible for characters to be turned or to have their own personal objectives change midway through the game. A great example of that in if you're not aware of Werewolf, it's basically like Mafia, or a couple of people in the group are evil and everyone else has to figure out who they are game. One of my favorite variants on that, which creates really nice narrative beats, which could work in a heist setting as well, is The Lovers, which is where two people are bound, like Romeo and Juliet at the start of the game, and it doesn't matter what they otherwise are, whether they're werewolf and villager, two werewolves, two villagers. If one of them dies, they both die. And that creates this really fascinating thing but if everyone else dies, they both win, regardless of their actual factions. And I really like mechanics like that. So I think if you were looking to, I guess, create a twist system, it's not quite the same one as the heist thing that he originally was asking about, but there are definitely ways to get players to act in a way that is based on their own agency that nonetheless creates plot twists like what movies and books and that have.
Oh, I've got a real hankering to play Werewolf now.
Oh no.
Ah!
It's impossible.
There's only 3 of us. That wouldn't work at all.
No. It would just be shouting at John.
That's true. Oh, poor John.
Poor John. Jack writes, Dear Crate and Crowbar, taking the title of the podcast quite literally for a moment, imagine you are a crate within a video game world, about to be smashed to bits by the crowbar-wielding protagonist. Based on who you are as a person, what unique power-up do you bestow? Love the pod, look forward to hearing more. Jack.
Is cake a power-up?
I guess. Would you just be a crate cake?
Hang on, is the crate made of cake?
No, it's, when you crack open a crate in Half-Life and there's stuff inside and
I've
you get the
never
goodies.
played Half-Life, you know this.
Okay.
Is it like when you bash a box and then...
Yeah, like in Mario.
Yeah.
You headbutt a box and
So this is the concept that perhaps a box is secretly like a fire flower on the inside.
Yeah.
That has dreams of, making somebody throw.
Hang on. So is your interpretation of Mario that he headbutts the boxes so hard their dreams fall out?
But isn't that what the question was?
No.
Because it was based on our personalities.
Well, yeah, but it's what, I suppose it is, yeah.
So, like, it would be what we dream of, really, wouldn't it? Or like what we...
You're right, you've shamed me. You've probably shamed me. I thought that was stupid, but it's not.
What kind of protagonist murders boxes that dream?
Yeah. Oh, I feel really bad now. That's
Gordon Freeman.
An entire swathe of gaming that I'm never going anywhere near.
I think we devalued crates in games for so long, thought they were lazy level design, but actually it was just where they lived.
Well, in Metal Gear, don't you you get inside the box, so
you
that
pretend to be a box, yeah.
Exactly.
I would be Solid Snake. No. I would be a, I don't know, 15 armor pickup or something. You're sort of kind of glad it happened, but ultimately it is of no meaningful consequence.
I don't know.
I would be the booby-trapped one that makes you resent and scared of all further crates. And it just makes you really sort of slow and lazy.
I want something aspirational. I want the star from Mario or something, the thing that you always want. That would be good, wouldn't it? Why, I'm not going to put myself down in this box scenario. I'm going to have something great.
Would you be the Tanuki suit from Mario?
Oh.
Turn into a flying raccoon
that would
man.
Be pretty great, wouldn't it?
It's basically a onesie.
Yeah. No, I preferred the bee one. I wanted to try and cosplay as the bee, but I couldn't get the butt to look right. 'Cause it's really padded. But anyway.
I think we've established that you're the bee suit from Super Mario Galaxy.
Oh. But also cake and invincibility and I just want this to be the most broken, overpowered box there is, you know?
And
because why not?
Indeed, why not? Why not? You can have your dreams.
Yeah.
Till a little Italian plumber headbutts them out of you.
Yeah. And then I have to do more dreaming. I can think different things once he's done that, you know? I could start thinking about Play-Doh and shoes and trees.
You know how you hate the word whimsy?
But
might have ventured into that territory there.
You can just, okay, fine. Well, I was just thinking of things that you might want to dream about. You know?
Play-Doh.
Well, I mean, I was on the phone to my toddler niece this afternoon, to be fair.
Okay, no, that makes complete sense.
My brain is still on the 2-year-old play toys sort of spectrum of activities.
All it takes is a phone call.
Play-Doh smells amazing.
Yeah, heard that about him.
What? Oh. Is this a sex thing?
No, I just, never mind.
Okay.
You know Plato?
What, the philosopher?
Yeah.
But
just sounds a bit like Play-Doh. It's not a good joke, Pip. Not a good joke. And I don't want to labour it. But I also wanted to explain it briefly. Before we move the fuck on.
The Early Learning Centre's Republic.
Exactly.
Soft Sculpey.
Yeah, exactly. The first thing you do is kill all of the poets.
Can we move on
yes.
from the boxes?
Utkrisht Dankar, which I hope I'm getting right, who's Fanatical Fighter on Discord, writes, Dear Thing Containers and Thing Openers.
Ooh. What?
One of the things I've noticed recently in video games is that I tend to like games where failure, death detection, or other calamities that often happen isn't the end, but the game continues on, perhaps with a different challenge. An example of this would be Shadow of Mordor, where the player character's death will have a substantial effect on orc politics of the region, but doesn't call for a reload. Another example would be a soldier dying in XCOM. This just makes the current mission harder and future missions more difficult to fill up with experienced soldiers. Similarly, you can lose an entire squad in XCOM but still be able to come back. I guess my question is, what do you feel about such soft failure modes in games, particularly in games where you can't undo the failure by a quick load back to an old save file? What other games have you seen such systems in? Thanks for the answer and the amazing pod. P.S. I'd love to see how you mangle my name. Smiley face. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm not trying again. Well, I kind of mentioned this earlier with, Darkest Dungeon, which I think does it really well. Particularly because I'm the kind of person who is inclined to want to load a save if something goes really badly wrong, but it's made me want to own my failure. It even tells you at the start, gives you a little pop-up that says people are going to die, this is a game about making the most of it. Which I suppose is the challenge that faces a lot of these games, is they have to kind of reach out to you and say, we're not like those other games. You're allowed to fail in this one. The other example, the reason I want to read this question is I thought Fable 2 handled this really well. I had a really interesting idea for it, which was, maybe we've even mentioned this before, but dying didn't really affect you in any way. You lost some experience and stuff, but it very easy to get it back. But your character gained scars that were, you had to then, if you didn't want to be
you had to buy a potion, didn't
you had to pay some money to get rid of them. And I really like that idea of giving you like a cosmetic penalty for failure. That I think sort of makes you not want to fail. Because I think people naturally don't want to fail. They don't want to be beaten up by a goblin, even if it doesn't lose them anything. And it gives them a consequence for failing, but it doesn't ever make you repeat yourself or ever make you, because actually when you die in that game, you like get reborn like an explosion of force that like actually helps in some ways. But it's enough to make you not want to die just that you're not as pretty, which is, kind of worked for me. I like that idea. Any other death-related video game thoughts?
Did I mention this last week? I really can't remember. But it's not exactly an answer to this question, but I did want to say that of all of the negative things I've said about Battleborn, I did really like its explanation of limited respawns. Like, that's actually, like, one of the sort of smartest explanations of that I've seen in a game that just fitted the tone that it takes, because what it does is it just tells you that you, if you die, you get sort of resynthesized at a particular, like, what are they called? Checkpoint. But you can only do it a certain amount of time because it's a really expensive process, and quite frankly, they're not like paying the bill for you to just like fanny around and keep dying, basically.
Don't overdo it,
yeah, and so like I just quite like that as a neat sort of, well, this is why it's not, infinite. And obviously it is kind of functionally infinite because otherwise the game wouldn't work, but yeah, there's a kind of, I just quite liked that little detail of it.
It also mentioned, and I have mentioned this before, but almost to round off a thing from previous pod, that thing I experienced at Total War Warhammer where it surprised me by having a more robust soft failure system than I thought it did, and particularly compared to other Total War games where I thought I'd fucked up, but actually my playthrough became richer and more interesting for the fact that I came back from a setback rather than to simply reload to perfect it. That I can say did carry on right through to the end of the game, which I eventually won, even despite having had a total disaster. And at the end of that game, it gives you this timeline that you can scrub through or play through in fast motion, which it's just the highest level world maps are just colored in areas of the map, but you can like play through all, 270 turns or however long it took in like fast motion. And there's something in seeing like your own borders like expand and then dramatically contract and then expand again and watch yourself in quick motion go through the events that made you have that feeling of, oh, I've fucked this. I'm never getting that Western territory back or whatever. Like, it gives you this kind of historical perspective, which actually kind of makes those failures feel quite good after the fact.
Was it Tom that was saying, in a previous podcast about that he usually sort of tries to do or will reload to do like Hitman missions on, sort of super stealthy, like perfect kind of score or whatever. And it sort of surprised me. And then he was saying, I think, that he'd actually quite enjoyed it the one time where he had let it go a bit off-piste and had been caught out by things and had sort of had to make the best of a shit situation. And like, I tend to be in that position in all games that I play. And so, I mean, I could in theory just be saving forever and reloading and, trying to get those things. But I do find that it's not total failure because it's not because usually they're the kinds of games where the death part isn't a particularly interesting option, but certainly not perfect is the more interesting option for me, because otherwise it feels really frictionless. Like, I like the idea of sort of this almost catastrophe that you somehow manage to snatch a completion from, even if, the entire place is rubble by the end of it, and everyone's looking at you like, oh my god, you idiot. Like, there's something peculiarly satisfying about that.
I had a brief thought about the FTL expansion, which added cloning bays, which actually let you turn failure and death into a system you could exploit. With the away crews in particular, you could send your meat bags over to the enemy ships to do as much damage and then die, and then they respawn back on your ship. And just the way it interacted with the other systems turned what would otherwise be a fatal encounter into something that you can actually gamify, which is quite interesting.
I was going to say, in talking about stealth games, Metal Gear 5's, the Phantom Pain's scoring system creates a sort of soft failure thing where the first time you play a mission, you are not going to do it optimally. And you've got a billion options, and it's really wide open, and it supports loads of different approaches, and lots of them are fun and rewarding, and you can succeed fully. But there's always something you didn't do, or an option you didn't take. And if you want to unlock everything and do everything, then it really rewards you going in and trying, trying to get a different animal rating at the end. You don't want to just be a Doberman or a bear. You want to be the cool snake or whatever it is at the top. And that means that it's not necessarily a failure system. I mean, the game has soft failure in terms of screwing up stealth and shoot your way out and stuff like that. But it means that playing through a mission once actually expands the possibilities for doing it again by showing you ways in which you could have been better. So it combines some of that, soft failure of any kind of graded score-based thing. The ultimate example of which is, probably a racing game. Like, racing games are about slightly failing constantly and just trying to unfail at every corner and straight and everything else. Next question comes from Grizzly, who writes, Dear Cockpit and Joystick, one of the most popular college studies in the Netherlands right now is game design, a broad study that involves things like 3D modeling, animation, and programming. 1,600 students get the certifications each year. However, only 60 people start a career in the Dutch games industry each year, and this includes people who have not studied game design. In short, it's extremely hard for anyone who studied game design to actually get a job designing games. Are there any jobs that could use someone with a particular set of skills working in the games industry provides, and a dedicated game design study is actually useful in an industry that seems mostly populated by people who've rolled in from other industries or taught themselves game design the romantic way by spending lonely nights in their bedroom lit only by the blue light of their computer screens? Hope you are maintaining your sanity in the latest wave of Brexit, regret, excitement, and Britta disappointment. Grizzly.
Oh, I like that ending. I mean, not like it, but it's good. Well done, you.
We respect it.
Yeah.
John, you got a game design qualification, is that
I did.
correct?
I did one of those very general game design things at uni, and that number, that massive segment, sounds about right. But a lot of people stopped going just because the course wasn't what they wanted. They didn't realise that making games would actually be hard work. They believed the advert, the tightening up the graphics on level 3 advert, where you apparently make games with a control pad.
Wait, hang on, John. Don't.
This is annoying.
It is, I'm sorry.
There's an analogy that I use, which is you don't go to bakers and ask them if they just eat cakes all day. That's not how baking works. It's not how games
It's how
work.
my baking works. I can tell you that.
But yeah, there's lots of reasons for that massively reducing number. And then, in my case, particularly, doing a very generalist course was not enough, did not teach me enough to actually go and get what in games are very specialised jobs. by the end of 3 years learning about art, code and design, I was not good enough at any one of those things in order to then make the jump straight into the industry. That may have changed as the courses evolve and become more appropriate. But I think he made a point about people coming in from outside the industry rather than using those specific games design things, and that is an incredibly important part of it. On the art side at least, art directors, when they're hiring, will often look for people with a lot of experience outside the industry because they bring in new ideas. And if your game design course and you're trying to go into level design and so on, if you constantly just learn by looking at old games, you can't bring anything new to the industry. And the industry starts to fold in on itself and become very niche and start eating itself. So you need those fresh ideas and you need that fresh blood. So yeah, from an art perspective, directors will look for architects or cartoonists or animators and working in the TV industry and stuff like that, and bring them in and then teach them how to games. And that keeps things a lot more fresh. Not to say that your degree is going to be useless or anything.
How did you transition then? Did you do more? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
How did you art?
How did you game?
At least my contemporaries all did roughly the same thing. We came out of uni and we worked in restaurants and pubs part-time for 2 years while working on our portfolios and teaching ourselves. And then we were good enough to go into games.
Right.
When it's that like self-selecting the people who have the passion to go into games or the madness. And that's quite useful when you actually end up in an industry which in some cases will expect you to crunch and work unsociable hours and so on.
I guess my question then is, do you regret doing the course in terms of the work that you've ended up doing? As in, like, would it have been not a better use of your time, because I don't want to, devalue any experiences that you had off the back of it, but would it have, to have the work opportunities that you have now, would it have been more fruitful or a more direct route to do the 2 years of building your portfolio and then try and go straight into it? Or was there something from the course that has actually proven useful in collaboration with your practical side of things?
So yes, I can't ignore what I learned at uni too much. Mostly because I was very unfocused, and having a sample of all the different disciplines and breaking down how the industry actually works and so on was extremely useful. It was then up to me to say, well, I want to do art now, and then put the hours into that. But if you're looking at uni courses and so on, but you're incredibly motivated, you're already kind of good at art, or you're a great coder or so on, and you know what you want to go into games, and you kind of roughly understand how the industry breaks down into those kind of 3 main sectors, then your time is much better spent either, especially if you're an artist, just working on your portfolio. Degrees don't mean anything to artists. You can either draw or you can't. Or you go away and you do a specialist course. You either do your coding course or like an architecture course or an animation course.
I've seen architects mentioned more and more in relation to games. I don't know whether that's just because more and more blogs are being sort of written by people sort of peripherally. Sort of like with The Witness, I think they had architects who informed on sort of how structures worked and how castles would degrade over time and, all of that kind of stuff. And I think there was an architect who was involved with the Luminosity project and, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Basically people are really always looking to bring fresh ideas into games. And if you can wangle your portfolio to have something like that, you'll stand a much better chance of getting a job.
That's very good advice. Gemma writes, Dear C2 and C4 ISR, I'd like to start this email by thanking you for the podcast. Both me and my partner are avid listeners. And so since we're often away at the weekend, your podcast has entertained us on many an occasion. As well as being keen PC gamers, we are also the owners of 2 cats, one of which has some very definite views about how much attention we should be giving to them compared to gaming. As I tend to play strategy games alongside the occasional BioRPG, I've developed a gaming position which allows my cat to lie in front of my keyboard with her head resting on my arm, which usually leaves her content. My partner, on the other hand, has had to put Iron Man campaigns on hold to avoid cat-related deaths during play if the cat is awake and seeking fuss from her. My question is...
They are, aren't they? Fuss-seeking missiles.
Seeking fuss. It's a good phrase. My question is, do any of you have similarly disruptive pets? And if so, how do you deal with them? Before we get to that, she adds a PS saying that her partner Laura's birthday is coming up.
Aww.
And will we wish her a happy birthday?
Yes!
Which we absolutely will.
Happy birthday, Laura.
Happy birthday.
Yeah.
That's the first birthday shout out we've ever done in like 147 of these, I think.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, let's do shout outs more often. That's nice.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Have a lovely day.
Have a lovely drive, apparently.
I hope Laura gets fuss. What?
Have birthday, good fuss.
Yeah. So,
pets.
Well. So, we don't have pets at the moment. I don't think any of us have pets, do we? I used to, though.
You used to have a nightmare cat.
No, best cat.
I'm talking about Eva.
Oh. Yeah. Yeah. She wasn't mine. She was my housemate's. She was a jerk. She used to jump on me when I was trying to do work before I banned her from my room. Anyway, I had a really needy cat who I adored, and he was like that kind of like, he'd got to that level of being old and a bit saggy and chubby and like would would just sort of want to like, he did that thing of falling asleep on you and then he'd sort of spread out in that way that a chubby cat kind of can. And it was more like sort of being underneath some warm, furry, silly putty that was gradually pooling around you. And so that was kind of interesting because I used to sort of sit and play like Warcraft or like some hidden object adventures or something with him just like asleep on me. But he was more of a pain when it came to other stuff, like just in terms of like, he absolutely hated it if you shut a door on him and he wanted to be with you. Like he got really needy when I was back home from university for like a year or so. And like he was really old and like loved attention. And so I would go and have a shower and then you'd hear noise outside, like, cause it was like, you've locked the door on me! What are you doing in there? You're seeing other cats! And just like, for God's sake. So you'd open the door, you'd let him in and he'd just be like, oh, thanks. And then you'd get in the shower and then you'd hear like a thump at the other end of the thing and he'd just be like, oh, and then he'd just be like, oh, I'm getting wet. Why am I getting wet? Why am I in the shower? You've made me get in the shower. Oh my God, what is your problem? So then you'd have to dry yourself and then you'd have to dry him and then he'd just be like, I love you. And then scratch you and then leave. You're just like, oh my God. So yeah, like that's more the level of dickhead that he was existing at. And my parents have another cat called Daisy, and she's, like, the name kind of hints that she's really delicate. She's not. She's built like a little tank. And one of my brother's friends came round once and was like, I didn't know you had a dog. And it's like, yeah, Daisy, you're going on a diet. But, cause she's got such heft to her, she, like, would, when I was taking pictures of frogs in my parents' pond, she would come up and she would want attention, so she'd do that cat thing of like rubbing herself against your butt as you peered over into the pond. But because she had so much ballast behind her, it would properly like try and push you in. So it was just like this permanent risk of drowning from that awful cat.
I think I broke my parents' dog with games.
Really?
I think I broke a dog.
Oh.
And the reason for this, so, the dog's name is Moses. He's a poodle. Because, due to childhood asthma, we always had poodles because they don't molt. So they're hypoallergenic and very, very intelligent. And my parents got Moses when I was living with them after I left uni and I had my first job. And he was a tiny little puppy, and I was a bit sort of resistant to the idea of getting him when we got him because it was only about 9 months since my childhood dog died. And I was in the kind of like, we can't possibly ever replace him, let alone with another poodle kind of camp. But we got this puppy, and, you know, my life at that time consisted of like trying to freelance games journalism and playing video games and stuff. And then it turned into playing video games and like getting really into raising this little puppy who I like instantly fell in love with. And, you know, as, from, you know, reluctant to raise dog to how many things can I teach this dog? And, the dog I'd grown up with had never been like particularly interested in like, he didn't have any dog hobbies. Dogs can have hobbies. They totally get into things. And like, one thing I was really keen is that Moses didn't get into the habit of tugging on stuff. Like, the dog I grew up with, Seamus, would always try and like wrestle anything he wanted out of your hands. And I wanted to teach Moses that you don't get what you want by, you know, just pulling on it with all your dog might. So I taught him to fetch, like, you know, reasonably elaborately from quite a little age. And like I would reward him with getting to fetch the special toy and stuff. And he'd bring it to you and put it at your feet, and then you'd throw it for him or hide it for him. And that's his favorite thing, is like trying to find stuff. Like poodles are working dogs. They're truffle dogs, and, you know, they love finding stuff. And I don't know whether it was a fact of his breed necessarily, because the other poodles hadn't been like this, but he's got to be coming up on 9 now, 8 or 9. And he is more into that. Like, he is into finding and fetching and retrieving things in the way that people I have known have lost their lives to World of Warcraft. You know what I mean? Like, he is seriously addicted to the game of fetch, to the extent that, later, when he got a bit bigger, if I was playing a game at my PC, he would come up and put his, like, face on my knee with a tennis ball, like a slobbery tennis ball, and just like drop it on my pants and then get me to throw it for him. And if I stopped throwing it, he would jump on my bed and start rolling around on his back, like, well, I suppose I'll have to make my own fun. And then if I persisted in not doing what he wanted or indulging his desire to play this game, and he didn't choose to go off on assault and get my mum to help, which would be his previous method, he would then just conveniently forget that he was house trained. It's like, well, if you're not going to indulge me, then I suppose the only thing to do is to pee. Which is, yeah.
Does that strategy work? Asking for a friend.
It does when you're a 1-year-old poodle.
Huh.
You still get thrown outside.
Huh.
But like, he is seriously into that game, and to the extent that he developed rules, like actual dog rules. So, and I can, you know, if we ever go visit my parents, but I can demonstrate this. Like, so if you
we ever. It makes it sound like this is like some notional thing.
Well, we've done it before, but I don't think I did. It demonstrated
but yeah, tell me the dog rules.
The specific fetch rules. So, like, he has a clearly expressed preference for difficulty. So if you throw it, like, not very far, he'll be like, well, I will fetch this because I have to. But I don't, like, this level was lame. And like, if you throw it really far, that's good. Yeah.
He liked it when I threw it so that it bounced off the door and then into the hallway in an unexpected direction.
That's a good one. Little trick shot. He loves that. He'll go find that. He'll be very happy about it. The best thing you can possibly do is pretend to throw it, fake it out, and put it behind you. It only works every now and then, because he will get wise to it. But if he doesn't get wise to it, he'll run into the room, look for it where he thinks it went, and come back and look at you like, did you fake me out? And then he'll go away again, and he'll keep doing this almost indefinitely until the moment you reveal that you've still got it, at which point he'll come into the room and freeze completely, like, you bastard, it's happened again. But the rules thing, that's all dog stuff. The rule thing apparently became clear to me when I realized that if I, rather than throw it, placed it on the floor in front of me, it set to ball. This triggered the other variant of fetch, which is competitive, like, race fetch, where it's like whoever can grab it first. And he will always back off, so it's equidistant between you and him. Like, he will, like, if you place it right next to him, he'll back off. If you place it right next to you, he'll move forward slightly. And, like, we created this whole game about, like, standing completely still and then going for it. And, like, and then, I mean, maybe I'm reading into his behavior a bit, but I don't know to what it's so consistent that I'm not to what extent it actually is. If you go for it, so that you don't lose if you go for it and don't get it. Because if you get it, you're expected to put it back straight away. Because he will. He's little and fast, right? If he goes for the ball before you do and he gets it, he'll just immediately put it back down and then step back to equidistant. The game is won when you went for it and you meant it. If you fake out, it doesn't count. So if you weren't intending to try and grab the ball, I don't know how I ended up creating this game with a dog, but so if I kind of like twitch, like I'm going for it, but I make no serious attempt to pick up the ball and he rushes, if he recognizes what I've done before he's gotten to it, he will immediately stop and back off back to safe distance. If he gets the ball, he'll go like shit and then put the ball back and then he won't actually shit. That's when he hasn't, when he's misbehaving. Anyway, so, it didn't really, his interruption of my game playing was only ancillary to his endless fucking desire to play this game until I moved out. And even now, if I come home, he will like look at me, go like, hey, it's you, and then find a ball. Like straight away. I think it drives my parents mad. But, as far as I can tell, he does understand quite a sophisticated set of rules for fetch and variants on fetch. I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, but I did spend a lot of time with that dog. And it is exactly what would happen that I would accidentally create the world's most competitive dog.
Yeah, I mostly just played cat buckaroo with Fudgy. It just, like, he'd fall asleep on me and I'd just put everything that was within arm's reach on him until he shook it off.
I think we've both got very representative relationships with our pets of our youth. I didn't really answer the question because, we don't have pets now and can't really help you game around your cat, but it was an excuse to talk about lovely dogs and cats.
Yeah, I think it's more that, you do find yourself gaming in weird positions just because you can't put your elbow where you wanted to because there's a cat's head in the way, or, you do find yourself having to explain things in chat when something has walked across your keyboard. But
I guess I can recommend guinea pigs as the perfect gaming pets, because they are terrified of you and want absolutely nothing to do with you at all.
But they need each other, don't they? If you have just one of them, they freak the hell out more than usual, and they're just like, oh, I'm gonna freak out and die alone. Just like, oh, for God's sake, here's a friend.
We shall wrap up this week's questions.
Yes.
With Greg. Hello, Greg.
Hi.
Hey, Crit and Crowbar crew. Tom F's
Greg
Hitman...
the Grim Reaper.
What?
That's a console game reference, so I shall shut up.
It's okay. Tom F's Hitman Morgue story that he shared on a recent episode of the podcast got me to thinking about similar instances of minutish details in a game world, and how those details can help almost total immersion for the player. 2 instances in my recent gaming history come from Gone Home and The Witcher 3. Gone Home has an amazing little detail in the world in the form of a social studies book you find in the basement. For whatever reason, the book is an exact copy of the social studies book I had in junior high here in Washington State in the mid-90s. Needless to say, running into that bit of my past in a game from 2013 effectively blew my mind and cemented the game as one of my favourites of the past few years. The Witcher 3's game world managed to impress when I was walking through Novigrad and it began to rain and the NPCs started scrambling to find cover. Watching them scurry to get undercover just added to the feeling that the world CD Projekt Red created for The Witcher 3 is truly another world existing somewhere, running along its own time. Anyways, would love to hear if you guys have any favourite examples of little details that really help a game world feel like a real world. Thanks. Sincerely, Greg.
I was going to mention Everybody's Gone to the Rapture for this because I've said this before, I think, but it was definitely the first time I can remember ever seeing so many British things in a game. And I don't mean British things in that sort of weird Austin Powers-y way. And it doesn't get all of them exactly right, because I know people have sort of complained about, I don't know, particular accents or particular whatever else, but it's very peculiar things like those little signs that denote British fire hydrants, or the thing that really, really got me was in the phone booths. They have the local, like the local phone number or whatever, but the area code doesn't have a 1 after the 0. And I remember that switch over when I was a little kid, like that all of the area codes suddenly went from 0 something to 01 something, and having to sort of relearn my phone number, just as a kind of, a thing. And so seeing that and sort of pinpointing it in time in England somewhere was kind of amazing in that tiny mind-blowing moment way that I think Greg's talking about, maybe.
Yeah, that sounds...
I remember I really enjoyed... It's not quite the same thing, but I really enjoyed the lore in Mass Effect, reading through all the... It's kind of a mix of soft and hard sci-fi. Soft sci-fi?
Squashy sci-fi.
Squashy sci-fi.
Firm.
In particular, I really enjoyed, in a massively geeky way, there's a mission in Mass Effect 2 where you board one of the Reapers, which is kind of drifting in space. And the way they find that Reaper, which has gone dark or cold or whatever, is they plot there's a scar on a planet from a Reaper weapon, and they back trace the shot that fired it, and calculate for all the orbits of the planets and so on, and say if we follow this line like CSI, like mounting the laser on the bullet hole and seeing where it points back to, we can go and find this thing. But I got an especially geeky thrill out of that because you can find that planet in Mass Effect 1.
Yeah.
You scan it and it said there's this weird trench down here and we don't know what made it.
Yeah, it says it looks, there's a theory that it's a glancing blow from a super weapon.
Yeah. And
then in Mass Effect 2, you figure that super weapon killed a Reaper, which is in a gas giant.
Yeah.
This
I
might
really want to
sound
high-five you right now.
It's
You
alright,
go
man.
on, lean over.
You're talking about, we can't actually, we're sat too far apart, I think.
Could you foot 5?
Oh,
my god.
that sounded lame because
Hang
it
on.
was.
I'll tell you what, we should have done it where you guys faked it and then I clapped in front of the mic.
I can edit this to make it
Okay.
but no, it's it's all lies.
Did it take into account, the sort of travel distance and, planetary drift and
They
stuff?
made a point of mentioning
Oh my god, that's
It's
amazing.
so good. They kind of moved them. It's interesting, Mass Effect's relationship with because I love the same thing about that series, that it's not hard sci-fi necessarily, but it seriously invests in how stuff would actually kind of work. And it moves away from it a little bit as the series goes on in order to furnish the drama of stuff happening and so on. But there's definitely stuff in it that I always thought was kind of purposeful, that you details that you don't pick up on unless you've really put the time in to read codex entries about how weapons work in space.
Yeah, I didn't.
So there's a
This
great
is
plot
Christmas.
detail, and I assume this is a deliberate detail which is that basically, because if you fire a bullet in space, it will keep going forever, right? Unless it hits something or it gets, runs into friction of some kind, right? It will just keep going and going and going and going. So there's in Mass Effect 2, there's a drill sergeant in the Citadel lecturing his troops about, if you're going to fire a bullet in space, hit the thing you're intending to hit. Because if you miss, you will ruin somebody's day somewhere, somewhen in the future. And for that reason, one of the like space combat strategies they talk about that there's very few space battles really in most of the Mass Effect series, but one of the combat strategies they talk about is, if you are, like, attacking a planet, like, forcing the defenders, like, trying to get into a position where you're between the defenders and their own planet is really advantageous because they don't want to shoot at their own planet because they can't stop that from happening. And then the very final battle, when sort of the whole fleet is brought to bear against the Reapers at the end of Mass Effect, it's kind of pointed that they completely open fire in a huge line and they're pointing directly at Earth. Mm-hmm. And I always took that as not just like a cool, massive space guns moment, but as a deliberate thing of like the situation is so bad that they're completely ignoring, like this is the nerdiest thing in the world, but it's really explicitly such a short-termist military strategy in the context of the codex entries from the second game.
Oh my god.
Because, also Earth is so fucked, it doesn't matter if we fire literally all the galaxy's guns at it at once, as long as we kill the big lobster that's in the way. Mm. And kill the big lobster they did. Mm. And that's why it's really good, I think.
Well.
Thanks, Distant Dog.
Yeah. And I hope that has answered at least some of the questions.
That's not really an environmental detail so much as it's a storytelling detail, but
we fished out a whole bunch of that stuff.
Yeah.
That dog agrees.
That dog definitely agrees. I opened the window because it was hot. No, I'm leaving the window open because it's dog.
What dreams do you have, dog?
Shut the fuck up, Distant Dog.
Anyway.
That's all the dog we've got time for.
Shall I try and remember all of the things for the end of the thing now?
Yeah.
That's the time for this. Okay, so, we have a website, and it's crateandcrowbar.com, and then we have a Twitter, which is @crateandcrowbar, and then we also have a Discord, which is linked to from crateandcrowbar.com, and there are also forums. We still have those. That's a thing. And that's on that crateandcrowbar.com /forums, I do believe.
No S.
No S. Okay. Crate and Crowbar /forum. And then also, I don't think there's any more things. Oh no, there's an email. You can email us. Oh god, this is so long and weird. You can email us on questions@crateandcrowbar.com, and I don't know if we have any other domains or whatever else, but we're individuals also, as well as crates and crowbars. So, who are you, Chris? Oh god.
I'm on Twitter @CThurston, that's CTHURSTE.
Yeah. Okay, good. How about you, John?
I am JOH_ARR.
Nice. And I am @Philippa War, which is PHILIPPAWARR. Hooray! God, is that everything?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank goodness for that. Thank you for listening, everybody. I know I'm supposed to do it in a waffle voice, but
a waffle voice?
Well, like an indistinct, as if you are speaking through a waffle. Or is that not a thing? I feel like this has got away from me somewhat. Is that what am I thinking of? Just waffles. They're quite indistinct, aren't they? Really.
I would say they're one of the more distinct novelty potato-shaped foods.
Oh no, I'm thinking of the dough ones. They're quite pillowy. Like if you spoke through one, it would be quite, doughy and indistinct. We should end this. Why are we not ending
It can't die. You've got to kill it.
Bye.